You think you're a good person, that you're kind, empathetic, mature, that you're doing the right thing by always being available, understanding, and pleasant. But the truth is much darker and far more painful. You're not being good, you're being afraid. And your fear has a mask, it's called being nice. Let's start with a brutal question. Who told you that being silent when you're hurt is strength? Who convinced you that avoiding conflict is wisdom? That swallowing pain is maturity? Somewhere along the way, someone, maybe many people, taught you that love must be earned. That worthiness is transactional. That if you want people to like you, you have to behave, smile, shrink, soften your edges. And you did. You became the one who apologizes, even when it's not your fault. You became the one who laughs when you want to scream. You became the one who says it's fine while bleeding internally. And now you call that survival tactic being a good person. But you're not fooling anyone, especially not yourself. Carl Jung warned us about this. He called it the persona, the social mask we wear to be accepted, the version of ourselves we manufacture so we won't be rejected, abandoned, or unloved. But there's a cost to this mask, a deadly cost, because the longer you wear it, the more your real self disappears. Think about it. When was the last time you told someone the truth? Not the filtered, safe truth, but the kind that risks disappointing them. When was the last time you allowed yourself to say, no, I don't want to, and I don't need to explain why? When was the last time you stood your ground and let them walk away? If you can't remember, it's because you've been living in performance mode. You've been performing politeness, compliance, compassion, but what you've really been doing is surviving, clinging to your role like it's a shield, when in reality it's a cage. And let's be honest, that cage is suffocating you. You wake up tired even after a full night's sleep. You're emotionally drained after every interaction. You feel a silent resentment toward people who never notice your sacrifices, but you keep doing it because you don't know who you are without the mask. You've tied your identity to how others see you, and that makes their approval your oxygen. But what happens when that approval doesn't come? What happens when, even after giving your best, people still treat you like an afterthought? You break, quietly, repeatedly, until one day you can't even tell whether the tears in your eyes are from sadness or from the unbearable exhaustion of trying to be good enough. And here's the most disturbing part. You call this empathy. You call this kindness. You call this love. But none of it is real if it costs you yourself. Empathy without boundaries is self-betrayal. Kindness without truth is manipulation. Love without authenticity is slavery. If this message woke something inside you, don't let it fade. Subscribe now and comment below, I refuse to be the person they trained me to be. Let's see how many of us are finally done playing small. You've built a reputation of being so nice, but in reality you're full of unsaid things, unexpressed anger, and unmet needs. And every time you suppress them, you are not being good. You're being afraid. Afraid of conflict. Afraid of being disliked. Afraid of being called selfish. But tell me, who benefits from your fear? Certainly not you. Not your mental health. Not your relationships. Not your soul. No, the only ones benefiting from your silence are the people who know you won't fight back. The ones who exploit your guilt. Who expect your availability. Who love that you're understanding because it makes you easy to control. Do you think that's love? Do you think that's what your worth is? Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And you've made a life out of avoiding yours. You've chosen safety over truth, approval over identity, performance over presence. But safety is not peace, approval is not love, and performance is not living. You are exhausted because you are constantly managing everyone's perception of you. You walk on eggshells so others can be comfortable. You absorb emotional burdens that aren't yours. You act like a therapist, a fixer, a savior for people who would never do the same for you. And now, you don't know how to stop. Because stopping would mean finally confronting what's underneath the mask. Fear, anger, loneliness, shame, and that scares you more than anything. But I need you to understand something. Real strength is not in how much you can tolerate. Real strength is in how much truth you're willing to live. Are you ready to stop hiding? Are you ready to disappoint the world, to be faithful to yourself? Because the longer you avoid it, the more you disappear. And one day you'll look in the mirror and not recognize the face staring back. You'll see the smile, but not the soul behind it. And that's when the real breakdown begins. but it doesn't have to reach that point. There's a way out, but it starts with a decision to drop the act, to stop being the nice one, to stop mistaking fear for kindness. In the next part, we'll confront the brutal reality. No one truly respects the person who's afraid of being disliked, not even the people who benefit from their silence. And once you understand this, you'll never beg for validation again. You think being liked will protect you, that if you're nice enough, quiet enough, humble enough, people will respect you. That if you never raise your voice, never set boundaries, never ask for more than what's offered, they'll keep you close. But here's the cold, unfiltered truth. No one respects the person who's afraid of being disliked. Not even the people who benefit from your fear. Let that sink in. You've built your entire identity around being the one who never offends, never disturbs, never demands. You avoid confrontation like it's a fire that could burn your entire life down. But the fire is already burning from the inside. Because the more you avoid conflict on the outside, the more you implode on the inside. Respect doesn't come from silence. It doesn't come from being agreeable. It doesn't come from shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. It comes from presence. And presence only exists when you're not afraid to take up space. Think about it. Who are the people you respect most? The ones who speak their truth, who set boundaries without flinching, who say no without explanation. It's not because they're rude. It's because they know their value, and value, when embodied unapologetically, demands recognition. But when you hesitate every time you speak, when you downplay your emotions, when you constantly rephrase your thoughts to avoid making someone uncomfortable, what you're really saying is, my truth isn't safe here. And if your truth isn't safe, then neither is your identity. You've become an emotional negotiator, constantly calculating how much of yourself you can reveal without risking rejection. But that calculation is costing you everything. Your peace, your self-respect, your presence. Carl Jung wrote, "That which we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. And right now your fate is a series of relationships where you're tolerated, not celebrated, where you're included only when convenient, where your silence is seen as weakness, not virtue. You're not being overlooked by accident. You're being overlooked because you taught people to do exactly that. Every time you avoid saying what you need to say, you reinforce the idea that your needs aren't urgent. Every time you excuse someone's disrespect, you teach them there are no consequences. Every time you laugh off pain, you signal that you can handle more. And people believe you. They believe that you're fine, that you're always available, that you're emotionally indestructible. But they don't see the internal bleeding, and because you've never shown them. You want to know why they don't check in on you? Why they don't apologize for the things they say? Why they always assume you'll understand? Because you've never held them accountable. Because you've never said, this is not okay. Because you've built a brand around being unfazed. But that brand is killing you. You keep showing up to places where you're not seen. Keep replying to messages that drain you. Keep agreeing to plans you secretly dread. Why? Because you're terrified of what might happen if you stop. Will they think I've changed? Will they say I'm difficult now? Will they leave? Probably. But what you don't realize is, they already left a long time ago. They left the moment you became a tool instead of a person. The moment your value became tied to your ability to serve, fix, or appease. That's not love. That's utility. And once you stop being useful, you'll be discarded. Unless you change the narrative before they do. People mirror what you project. If you present yourself as someone who needs nothing, they'll offer you nothing. If you speak like someone who doesn't expect to be heard, they won't listen. If you act like your time is disposable, they'll waste it. Respect is not about being feared. It's about being clear. Clear about what you tolerate. Clear about what you value. Clear about what you're willing to walk away from. But clarity requires courage. The courage to be disliked, the courage to be misunderstood, the courage to say, I'm no longer available for one-sided relationships. And that courage, that's what you've been avoiding. This isn't just a video. It's your turning point. Subscribe and drop this in the comments. I choose myself even if it costs everything. Say it loud. Say it for real. You've told yourself that keeping the peace is the right thing to do. But it's not peace you're keeping. It's control. You're trying to control how others see you, how they react, how they treat you. And in the process, you've lost control of the one thing that matters, how you treat yourself. Carl Jung also said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. and you've been terrified for years. Terrified to face the version of you that isn't agreeable, the version that gets angry, that has needs, that says no, that walks away. But that version is the only one capable of commanding true respect, because that version is real. You've tried the other way. You've tried being endlessly nice, endlessly forgiving, endlessly soft. And where has that gotten you? Into relationships where your silence is expected, your pain is invisible, and your loyalty is exploited. It's time to stop playing a game you never agreed to. You're not a punching bag. You're not a background character. You're not an emotional butler waiting for someone to tell you what they need. You are allowed to take up space, even if it makes others uncomfortable. You are allowed to speak your truth, even if it costs you approval. You are allowed to walk away, even if it leaves others confused. The alternative is to keep fading. And if that sounds easier, ask yourself, how much more of yourself are you willing to give away just to avoid temporary discomfort? Because the longer you avoid discomfort, the more it becomes your permanent reality. In the next part, we'll dive into the most dangerous consequence of this avoidance, how your fear of being disliked has turned you into the favorite target of manipulators, the kind of people who don't want you to wake up, who depend on your guilt, your softness, your fear. But once you see their pattern and your role in it, everything changes. You think being kind protects you, but what if I told you that your kindness has become your vulnerability, that the very trait you thought made you good is the one that made you a target? Because manipulators don't seek out loud, aggressive people. They don't chase after the emotionally unavailable. They look for the soft ones, the patient ones, the understanding ones, the ones who second-guess their anger and over-explain their boundaries. And if that's you, then you're exactly the type of person they search for. Let's be brutally honest. The manipulator's dream isn't someone weak. It's someone who appears strong, but has been trained not to use that strength. Someone who has the emotional intelligence to sense discomfort, but not the courage to confront it. Someone who's terrified of being seen as rude, so they choose to be walked all over instead. That's the trap, and it's one you've been stuck in for years. You think that if you stay calm, patient, and loving long enough, the other person will finally wake up, that they'll notice how good you've been to them, that they'll feel guilty and start treating you better. But here's the truth. Manipulators don't change when you're kind. They thrive. They feed on your empathy, on your hope, on your belief that if you just keep giving, something will shift. But nothing shifts except you. You shift from firm to flexible, from grounded to confused, from whole to broken. And all of it happens so gradually, you barely notice. At first it's small. They test you. Maybe they ignore a boundary. Maybe they cancel last minute. Maybe they say something slightly disrespectful and laugh it off as a joke. You hesitate to react. You don't want to overthink it. You want to be the bigger person. And that's when they know. That hesitation is all they need. Because now, they see you. Not as a partner, not as a friend, not as someone to value, but as someone to use. Carl Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And the unconscious pattern playing out in your life is this. You are rewarding the worst people with the best parts of you, and you're calling it love. It's not love, it's survival. It's the survival tactic you learned when being good was the only way to feel safe, when being useful was the only way to be noticed, when being compliant was the only way to avoid abandonment, and now you've become addicted to being needed, even if being needed means being drained. Let me ask you something. How many times have you said yes to something that made your stomach churn just to avoid making someone else uncomfortable? How many times have you bitten your tongue until it bled because you didn't want to start drama? How many times have you forgiven someone not because they changed, but because you were too afraid of losing the little they gave you? That's not love. That's emotional codependency dressed in the costume of compassion. And manipulators love it. They love when you text back even after they disappear for days. They love when you say it's okay even when it's not. They love when you make excuses for them, defend them, explain their behavior to others. Because the more you protect them, the more you betray yourself, but you can't see it. Not clearly, because deep down, you're still holding on to hope. You hope that if you stay kind long enough, patient long enough, quiet long enough, they'll finally appreciate you. They'll wake up, but they won't. Why would they? They have no incentive to change when your forgiveness is guaranteed, when your presence is permanent, when your love is unconditional, even when theirs never was. And here's what no one tells you. Manipulators don't just want control, they want predictability. They want to know that if they push a certain button, you'll respond exactly as expected, that if they guilt trip you, you'll fold, that if they go silent, you'll chase, that if they apologize half-heartedly, you'll melt. It's not just control, it's a system that you've unknowingly helped build. Carl Jung spoke of shadow work, the process of confronting the darkest parts of ourselves. And here's your shadow. You are terrified of being alone. So you tolerate manipulation disguised as connection. You accept breadcrumbs and call it a feast. You confuse attention with affection, and it's eating you alive. Because every time you compromise your boundaries for the sake of keeping someone close, a part of you dies, slowly, quietly, without resistance, until one day you wake up and realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. You're not kind, you're empty, not patient, just numb, not loving, just afraid. This is the silent death of self-respect, and no one around you even notices, because they've only ever known the version of you that exists to serve their comfort. But the moment you stop, the moment you say no, set boundaries, walk away, stop replying, that's when the mask falls off, and that's when they panic, because you were never a person to them. You were a function, a role, a source, and now that source is shutting down, and they will fight, not for you, but for what you give them. Your energy, your presence, your availability. They're not losing a relationship, they're losing access. But here's the truth you need to hold on to. You are not responsible for how someone reacts to your boundaries. You are not obligated to explain your silence. You are not here to bleed for people who never learned to heal themselves. Carl Jung reminded us that real wholeness requires confrontation, not just with others, but with ourselves. And the part of you that keeps tolerating pain needs to be held accountable, not with shame, but with truth. Because once you see it, really see it, you can't go back. You can't keep calling it love. You can't keep calling it maturity. You can't keep calling it strength. It's time to call it what it really is, emotional submission. And submission ends now. In the next part, we'll go even deeper. Because this behavior didn't start here. It started long ago, in childhood, in conditioning, in trauma. You weren't born to serve, you were trained. And until you face that origin, you'll keep attracting people who need you to stay small. But once you uncover the source, you'll never shrink again. You weren't born afraid to speak up. You weren't born terrified of rejection or addicted to approval or wired to betray your needs in exchange for affection. That came later. That was taught. That was programmed. That was passed down to you in the silence of your childhood, in the looks, the tone, the punishments, the neglect, the chaos. And little by little, you stopped being yourself and became who they needed you to be. You didn't become the nice one by choice. You became it by survival. Maybe you were raised in a home where conflict meant danger, where anger was met with punishment or worse, silence. Maybe you were the peacekeeper, the fixer, the emotionally available child in a family that didn't know how to hold space for anything real. Maybe every time you cried, they said you were being dramatic. Every time you were angry, they told you to calm down. Every time you needed something, they made you feel like a burden. So you learned. You learned to shrink your voice to be safe. You learned to prioritize others to avoid guilt. You learned to read every room before you spoke, just to make sure no one would get upset. You didn't learn emotional intelligence. You learned emotional hypervigilance. You became the person everyone could count on because you never felt like anyone truly counted on you. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." And that's exactly what happened to you. You carried their wounds, their expectations, their silence. You became the emotional extension of people who couldn't even face their own truth. And instead of being raised, you were molded. You became hyper-aware of everyone else's needs, but numb to your own. You knew exactly when to smile, when to be quiet, when to help, when to stay out of the way. You were rewarded for being easy, punished, directly or emotionally, whenever you tried to be more than that. And here's the most painful part. You learned to call this love. You confused being needed with being seen. You confused being useful with being valuable. You confused being good with being silent. And now, you're an adult who apologizes for existing. You apologize for being tired, for being unavailable, for taking time to yourself. You apologize for your opinions, for your boundaries, for your voice. You've become someone who negotiates their own identity in every conversation, afraid to be too much, too loud, too honest. But it didn't start here. It started the moment you realized that being yourself wasn't safe. That truth came with consequences. That authenticity had a price, and you couldn't afford it. So you chose safety over selfhood. And now you're paying the interest. Your relationships are one-sided because you were taught that love means giving, not receiving. Your boundaries are weak because you never saw anyone model healthy ones. Your self-worth is fragile because it's based on how well you perform the role of good. But good is killing you. Good is exhausting you. Good is making you invisible. And no one can see you, not even you. If you felt every word, it's because it was meant for you. Subscribe and comment, "I'm not here to be liked, I'm here to be whole." Let them feel the shift, starting with you, because you still believe the lie they gave you, that being chosen means being obedient, that being loved means being easy to handle, that being accepted means being small. Carl Jung emphasized that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, requires disidentifying from the roles you were forced to play. And that's what you're facing now. Not just healing, but unlearning. Not just becoming, but dismantling. You have to go back, not to relive it, but to reclaim what was taken from you. You have to meet the child version of yourself, the one who learned to be silent, and ask, what did you need back then that you never received? What emotions did you bury so deep they became your personality? What dreams did you kill to be loved? Because underneath your people-pleasing, your chronic guilt, your niceness, is grief. Grief for the version of you that never got to exist. Grief for the voice you silenced just to stay close to people who never heard you anyway. Grief for the emotional freedom you were never allowed to have. And until you allow yourself to feel that grief, to hold it without justification, you'll keep repeating the same cycle, giving everything to people who give you breadcrumbs in return. Not because you don't know better, but because deep down part of you still believes that if you give more, maybe this time you'll finally earn the love you've been chasing since childhood. But real love was never meant to be earned. It was meant to be recognized, and if someone can't recognize your worth without you sacrificing yourself first, it's not love. It's a replay, a reenactment of every wound that told you, you are only safe when you're useful. But you're not here to be useful. You're here to be whole, to take up space, to feel, to disappoint people if necessary, to exist fully, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Carl Jung said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration. That means you don't have to kill your kindness, but you do have to stop using it as a shield. You don't have to stop loving, but you do have to stop abandoning yourself in the process. And that's where the true work begins, in choosing your authenticity over your image, in choosing discomfort over deception, in choosing presence over perfection, because perfection is a performance. And you've been performing for long enough. In the next part, we'll face the inevitable consequence of this awakening. What happens when you finally stop playing nice, when you stop smiling through pain, when you stop being easy to love, the backlash, the isolation, the resistance, but also the rebirth. Because healing doesn't make your life more comfortable, it makes you more honest. And honesty always demands a price. When you finally stop being the nice one, everything changes. At first, it's quiet. You say no where you used to say yes. You pull back from the conversations that once drained you. You stop replying just to keep the peace. You don't explain yourself like you used to. You let the silence speak for you. And in that silence, some things begin to shake. People start noticing. But not because you've become more vocal, quite the opposite. They notice because the version of you they depended on is disappearing. And now they have to face something terrifying, the version of you that no longer needs to be liked to feel worthy. This is where the real test begins. The moment you step out of your performance, when you stop being emotionally available on demand, when you stop being predictable, safe, and self-sacrificing, people will react. And their reactions will reveal everything you need to know. Some will get angry, some will call you selfish, some will say, you've changed, and they'll be right. You have changed. You're no longer operating from fear. You're no longer seeking approval like it's oxygen. You're no longer trading your peace for proximity, and that threatens everything they were able to control about you. You see, the old you was manageable, malleable, easy to manipulate. The new you, they can't predict anymore. And what they can't predict, they can't control. That's why they push back. That's why they guilt trip. That's why they tell stories that make you question yourself. But you must remember this: their discomfort is not your burden. Their confusion is not your fault. Their disappointment is not your responsibility. Carl Jung said, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." And that's what this moment is, your inferno. You're burning down the false self. You're letting die the persona that kept you loved, but never respected. You're walking away from the illusion that if you're good enough, quiet enough, available enough, you'll finally be safe. But safety bought through self-abandonment isn't safety, it's imprisonment. So let them say what they want. Let them think what they will. You were never born to be understood by people who only loved the version of you that served them. This is the beginning of your rebirth. And rebirth isn't peaceful. It's not soft. It's violent in the way that all truth is. It shakes the ground you used to walk on and demands you build something new from the ruins. You'll lose people, but you'll find yourself. You'll walk away from environments where you were tolerated and into spaces where you are seen. You'll become quieter on the outside and louder within, because true power doesn't shout. It radiates. It doesn't beg. It attracts. It doesn't explain. It stands. Carl Jung taught that individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are, not who you were trained to be. And sometimes that process looks like betrayal to others. But it's not betrayal. It's liberation. The final tearing of the thread that kept you tied to a life that demanded you stay small. So let it tear, let it hurt, let it end, because what comes after is not just healing. It's sovereignty, it's presence, it's respect. And for the first time in your life, you will be living on your own terms, not as a reaction to fear, but as a declaration of truth. No more being the emotional crutch. No more bending just to be accepted. No more bleeding to prove you're good. You are not here to be nice. You are here to be whole. And if that means being misunderstood, if that means being alone for a while, if that means walking away from people who once felt like home, so be it. Because you've been homeless within yourself for far too long. Now is the time to come home, to return to the place inside you that knows your worth, even when the world forgets it, to rebuild your life around your truth, not around other people's comfort. This is the price of freedom, and it's worth everything you'll leave behind. So if this message struck something deep within you, don't run from it. Feel it. Sit with it. Let it burn away what no longer serves you, and then rise. Not as a version of who you were, but as who you were always meant to be, before the world taught you to be afraid of yourself. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, it's because a part of you is already awake. Don't go back to sleep. Comment below. I choose to stop shrinking. And let's show the world what happens when silence turns into self-respect. And don't forget, the next video continues this path of awakening. Click on it now and take the next step. You didn't come this far just to survive. You came to become.